another thing to think about that too, that it isn't so obvious when you first apprehend it, is that your life in the main is made up of things you repeat. And we tend to downplay the significance of things that we repeat because they're everyday, right? They're normal, they're drab. Coming home from work is a good example. You're going to come home from work 5 days a week. There's going to be a transition period from work that's 20 minutes. And that transition period is going to happen every day, and it's going to set the tone for the rest of the day. And so it's often the case that those transition periods are awkward for people and they don't do anything about it. And that's a huge mistake. So because 20 minutes a day, we can do the arithmetic, that's 20 minutes a day times 3. So that's 2 hours a week, let's say. It's 8 hours a month. So it's 12 work days a year, essentially. And so that's 5% of your life. That's 5% of your life. If you get 20 things like that right, you have your whole life right. And so you look at the things that repeat, right? You master them, you make incremental progress to making them as perfect as they can possibly be. You negotiate with your partner so that that occurs, and you allow that negotiation to make itself manifest imperfectly and in a manner that's ridden with errors so that you can continually correct it. And hopefully after you repeat it 100 times, you get it right. And you do that 20 times and everything in your life is set not only in order, but in the order that's on the edge of play, right? And you can do that. You have to think about, though, I see this with parents and their children, you know. You'll have someone with a 2-year-old and every bedtime's a fight. Well, you got to think that through, because parents actually only spend about 20 minutes a day in one-on-one interaction with their kids. It's a much smaller fraction of your time than you think. And if that interaction is bedtime and every night it's a misery, then what you've done is you've made that whole relationship into misery. And you think, well, it's only, you know, when I put my kid to bed. It's like, no, it's not only that, because it happens every day. And if that sets the pattern of your relationship, that it's nothing but strife and foolish conflict, then, well, how are you going to establish a good relationship with your child, and vice versa? All they are is a problem to you. And that's not a good thing. And so pay attention to the things that repeat. They're very, very important. That's your life. That people get obsessed about the exceptions, you know, vacations, the special occasions in their life. And those are often a disappointment, by the way. And that's fair enough, you know, because, well, that's because people overvalue them. And then they go have the experience and it doesn't meet their expectations. And so then they're miserable while they have it and they have nothing but regret. And part of the problem with that, the part of what's causing that, is that they're paying way too much attention to what's hypothetically exceptional and not nearly enough attention to what is normal and repeats, right? And that's a form of pride too, because you might want to identify with only the things in your life that are exceptional and not the boring and drab day-to-day things that you do all the time. But, you know, you could elevate those to the point of some optimized perfection. You can tell you're doing that, by the way, because you can do it in a state of play. And that's also a very good thing to know. It took me a long time to figure this out. I spent decades trying to understand what the opposite of tyrannical power was. It's not an easy thing to conceptualize, but I believe that it's play. And I think that you know if you have a situation mastered, if you can do it playfully. So imagine the situation where you're trying to put your little kid to bed, and that turns into a bout of play. Well, then you've got it, and then you do nothing but look forward to that. And that would be a good deal. If you were in a situation where you could do nothing but look forward to the things you repeat every day, that'd be a good bargain to strike with yourself. And it's also something to consider too. If you have things you're doing every day that you dread, well, one question you might ask is there something wrong with your attitude? Because maybe there is, and you should dig into that and find out. But another conclusion you might draw is maybe you're not doing the right thing. You know, and then you have to strategize carefully, and that has to do with the development of a vision about maybe you hate your job. You know, and you think, well, I have to have this job because I have to take care of my family. That's a tyrannical attitude all the way through. and you're blaming your family. So that's a real good deal for them, eh? Is they're now the shackles that keep you in slavery to a tyrannical job that you hate. That's a lovely gift to lay at the feet of your family. There's a fair bit of pleasure of martyrdom in that too. And you might say instead, and this is what you can do too if you're trying to understand the obstacles that are getting in your way as you progress, is, well, why are you stuck with this damn job? And you got to think about that in detail. Like, I had clients, for example, who were stuck in miserable jobs. I'd say to them, well, let's take a look at your resume, your CV. Bring it in next week. And then they wouldn't. And then I'd have to find out why. It's like, well, why do you not want to show your CV to someone? Well, here's some reasons. You haven't updated it for 10 years. Okay, so then that's kind of daunting, right? Because it's actually like, just because it's difficult, you have to sit down and go through your life, and you have to structure that in a way that's comprehensible. But then too, the problem with the CV is you have to reveal everything about you that's embarrassing. Maybe you have to paper over various aspects of your stupidity with lies, and that undermines your confidence about the CV and about the job, say the job interview process, because you have holes in your past that you don't know what to do with. Well, you face that, you think, okay, well, you know, I had clients, for example, they had 95% of their undergraduate degree, and then they stopped. And there's a reason for that. I don't know, maybe they didn't want the responsibility that would be attendant upon completing the degree. Maybe it was a good way of getting back at their father who forced them to go into engineering when they wanted to be an artist. Like, there's some reason you stop with it 95% done, and then you have to fix that, because otherwise you're embarrassed about it, and if you're embarrassed about it, then you're not going to be confident when you go to your job interview, and if you're afraid of not being confident, you won't look for a job, and then if you won't look for a job, you'll blame your wife because you have to be tyrannized at work. That's a stupid game. And so instead of that, you might figure out, well, why the hell did you quit when you were within, you know, grasping distance of the goal? And God only knows why that is, but maybe it's something that isn't even true of you anymore. You know, maybe you outgrew whatever stupidity had made you do that 10 years ago. To put your CV together, you have to put your past together. And maybe that takes 2 years, you know. If you want to find a job you actually like, 2 years isn't too much of an investment to make. And maybe you're terrified because you're going to throw your CV out in the wind, and 49 out of 50 times it's going to be rejected. But then you could look at it actuarially and presume, well, of course that's the case, because lots of companies advertise positions that don't even exist because they want to keep a continual flow of CVs going through the system, or they advertise because they're required to legally and they already have a candidate. Or it could be that, you know, at this particular moment, you're not the best candidate for that particular, like, there are a lot of reasons why you're not going to get the job, but they're true for virtually everyone. And when you know that the base rate for CV submission failure is 95%, then you don't have to take it personally. And you can think, well, I need a new job. Okay, I have to send out, well, you ask yourself, how many bloody resumes can you stand to send out a week? And that's a serious question, right? How much disappointment can you take? I don't know, maybe you can handle 20 and maybe you can handle 5. There's going to be some individual difference in that, but you could consult yourself and find out. And maybe you're so afraid to begin with that you can only send out 1. It's like 1's a lot more than 0. And once you've done 1, well, maybe you could do 3. And once you did 3, maybe you could do 10. And you could settle on, well, I'll send out, you make a routine out of it. I'll send out 10 resumes a week for like a year. You know, and if you do that, if you've updated your CV and you're aiming at jobs that are hypothetically within your purview, and you have a good story to tell about why you would be the right candidate, and you can figure that out too. If you have a good story to tell, you're not going to be nervous about telling it, you know. So you got to ask yourself, well, why should someone hire you? And then you got to discuss that with someone, your wife or friends, and have them hammer away at you until you kind of know what you have to offer, right? And then you can go in there with a bit of confidence and you can say, well, I don't know much. I don't have any experience in this realm, but here's a bunch of things that I've done, and here's the investigations that I've made about your company, and this is why I think I'd be a good fit, and this is what I can offer to you, and I won't be a catastrophe, which is the one thing everyone hiring really wants to know. It's like, What do you think? Could we do this together? And if you have an attitude like that and you do get an interview, which you will eventually, then the probability that you'll get the job has gone up substantively. And so you don't have to stay in your damn rut, but you do have to figure out what elements of what you don't understand, that chaos and potential, are terrifying you into paralysis.